I want to read this little tidbit to you here. It says, this is from news.bitcoin.com. It says 722 banks reported unrealized losses of more than 50% of capital. More than 50% of capital. Now, wait, there's something significant here. It says here, unrealized losses exceeding 50% of their capital at the end of the third quarter of 2022. What is it? If it was that then, what is it now? Their system is rapidly collapsing. They're in big trouble. And that means there's going to be a lot of money on the table to scrape up, to scoop up. It's just my firm belief. I think that that's one of the reasons why Ripple's fighting so hard to stay in the United States and get clarity. They will run wild and scrape up those trillions. They can. There's no guarantee, but they can. I think that's one of the reasons why Stellar is going so hard to ingrain itself in the United States government. White House is calling them and all this other stuff. United Nations projects. It's not for nothing. They see that the house is falling. Those trillions will expand into quadrillions if you play the game the right way. This is chess, not checkers. But listen, this was in the third quarter of 2022. Since that time, we've had exponentially more interest rate hikes. Bonds have been eroded like you wouldn't even believe. We're sitting on a commercial real estate disaster. Have you been looking into that? I told people to look out for that commercial real estate. It's literally one of the things that might take down those small banks. Small banks. Small banks are in trouble. Then you have this brewing war between small banks and the big banks. It says here, this was from a presentation. It says the U.S. Federal Reserve has revealed in a board presentation by the Division of Supervision and Regulation that 722 banks reported these unrealized losses. The presentation released to the public in April is dated February the 14th. It highlights the impact of raising interest rates. It's not just raising interest rates. There's a lot of things that are wrong. Your monetary policy. This is another reason why I firmly believe, it's just my humble opinion, there's going to be so many more bank collapses. It's been one after another. What was the last one? PacWest. There was a couple other ones. I don't even know their names. This is happening so fast. The people will not trust banks after this next year or two. They won't. They're going to look for banking alternatives. They already are. There's so many people now, they're keeping their capital stored in gold. Listen, I've been a gold enthusiast for quite some time. I've never seen so many people trying to store value in gold. They're using gold, the gold cars. They got some gold, the coins. Some of them have the squares, whatever. They're sending it to liquidate. I mean, well, you know how to liquidate the physical gold. I've never seen it before like this. That's only going to increase. They're looking for alternatives. The bank coins can offer easier alternatives and even offerings that are building on the bank coins, because you can't have tokenized gold on the bank coins. You just have to have offerings to deploy those particular assets on chain. That's it. Doesn't have to actually, the bank coins don't actually have to be backed by anything. But then if you saw the last video that I put out, and you have what was going on in Texas, where they passed did they pass the bill? Something was happening with the bill where they want to have the digital assets backed by gold. Now, I was talking about Stellar. That doesn't mean XLM has to be backed by gold. They just have to bring that value to chain and issue that digital asset that's backed by gold, silver, and what else did they say? Did they say copper? I don't know. Issue that value on chain. What does it do to that price? Everything is rapidly changing. I think a huge chunk of the banking sector will be gone, or it will be greatly minimized. And then once we have regulatory clarity, if we can get that, we can take a lot of that value. We can take those trillions. We can do it. It's going to fall anyway. It's falling as we speak. There's no other clear alternative than us. Their trust is at an all-time low. Their customers will not come back to them. The customers, I don't know why they're doing this necessarily. I understand smaller banks, more risk, but at the same time, the bigger banks are not safe. The bigger banks are not safe. This is why you had Janet Yellen say what she said about JP Morgan. Oh, well, JP Morgan purchased, was it First Republic? Was that First Republic? But if, not Janet, was it Janet Yellen or was it Elizabeth Warren? I can't remember which one. My apologies. Don't quote me on this then. Just go look it up for yourself. Well, if JP Morgan doesn't do well, then the citizens will have to foot the bill. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. This is what the article said. This is what the article said. Like, come on. The people are not going to trust the banking industry, I think, at all over the next year or two. After that. Some people obviously are still going to use the banking industry. It's just tradition. They don't know anything else. But as you suffer more and more, you start to get accustomed to taking a little bit of a chance on something new that could be safer. That's the bank coin offerings. That's accounts and wallets on bank coin offerings, XRPL based wallets, Stellar based wallets where you custody your own capital, right? And it could even be used in conjunction with non-banking financial institutions, MasterCard, Visa. We have all these relationships already. Look at the setup. You look at the setup. What's it do to that price? Can't be dirt cheap. It's not going to be dirt cheap. I was reading an article said $3. No way. No way. We get that announcement from the judge this year. We get that announcement. Well, Ripple did put out one at a time possibilities. Time period possibilities was like in December or something like that. You did check that video. You saw that chapter, right? So you were able to get that article yourself. They said June, then they said also possibly in December. So this could stretch into 2024, which is then interesting because of MiCA legislation. We're going to run wild like a beast through Europe. Come on, Europe. Speed that up, please. I mean, look, I'm patient. I'm a long-term investor, but come on, we don't need to play games. Speed that up. We will run wild through there. So we're talking trillions upon trillions, and we didn't even sprinkle in tokenization. No, I have to have my chunk. I see where it's going. 722 banks. Okay. Let me just put this here. Okay, so this was an article from Stronghold on stronghold.co. They're talking about risk mitigation, but in correlation with what? Of course, Strongholds is Stellar. One of the stellar companies that's trying to go after the banks and doesn't make it any secret that they're doing that. They remind me a lot of Quant, actually, but they just don't do as much as Quant, but they're just as hungry as Quant. But they're using the examples of the failings of the banks to bring in their customers and showing how they do in a much better and more efficient way what the banks try to do but have failed at. They're gearing up to take customers from the bank system. You see where this is going? It says here, what is risk mitigation? Then as you scroll down one paragraph, it says, an example of this is planning for an unexpected event. Many startups face this head on with Silicon Valley Bank's failure. Founders with significant or all of their holdings with the bank struggled with how they could meet payroll the following week. You see how they're using very impactful language. And who is this aimed at? This is aimed at bank customers, big and small, people and companies. Can you imagine when there's regulatory clarity and they start advertising like this and they're a direct competitor and the people don't have any more faith or respect in the banks? Could be powerful. Now, just imagine someone like Ripple doing this. How much more powerful, or Hedera or Algorand, who really has major capital to have advertisements everywhere. And the people are searching for banking alternatives. A lot of people keeping cash right now. They've been pulling that cash out. Where's that cash going? Just sure some of it's making it into gold. A lot of people are just keeping that cash. They got safes and stuff like that. And, click clack, and people might think they protect their cash. Put it in their secret safes. Going to check cashers and things like that. They don't have to. Once the new financial system comes out, they don't have to do those things anymore. And if they custody their own capital, remember, they're going to be able to extract that at these different ATMs. There's going to be a bevy of different types of ATMs they can extract that value from because of their cards in these accounts and associations with, like I said, doesn't have to be banks, non-banking financial institutions. Very bank-like. So, I mean, like just seeing something like that, I can see the setup. They're getting ready to pounce. And when they do pounce, and listen, almost knocked my light over again, getting a little excited. And when they do pounce, boom, that should definitely have an effect on some of these things. Now, listen, I'm not a financial advisor. This is just my opinion from what I'm seeing here. Not financial advice, all right? I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just sharing my enthusiasm based on what I'm reading here. That's all. I'm going to read this last little bit to you here. Okay. It says here, this is from the dailyhodl.com. Listen, the dollar is in trouble. The dollar, and the way the financial system is set up now, the dollar's in trouble. In order to rescue the dollar, they will have to implement the new financial system. There's no way around it. They're going to get cut off from, I think they're going to get cut off from a lot of capital. A lot of value, not I wouldn't say capital, a lot of value they're not going to be able to access. The BRICS nation is not playing with them. And I'm going to read you this little tidbit, pay very close, well, just hear this out. It says, U.S. responds to massive BRICS expansion effort as nations push to launch global currency and ditch the dollar. Let me scroll down here. Okay, I want you to hear it from their own words. The U.S. State Department, so this is serious business, is responding to reports that the group of economically aligned nations known as BRICS is preparing a major expansion. The group, which plans to launch a global currency to compete with the U.S. dollar, has drawn interest from more than a dozen countries. There was like 22 of them now at this point. A dozen countries that want to join in. The list of potential newcomers includes several nations across Africa, and the State Department officials tell Fox News that the current U.S. policy will not interfere with African or other nations looking to join. Quote, we lead with an affirmative agenda for Africa, demonstrating the benefits of our governance and economic models. Listen, I watched personally, and a lot of people on this channel watched personally, how the IMF was handling things in Africa over the last 2 to 3 years. They did not operate on this basis at all. And in fact, they were operating in a very panicked way. Let's continue. But this is very telling. Why are they switching now? Let's keep going. U.S. policy does not ask our partners to choose between the United States and other countries. State Department officials say the agency's intent with international partners is focused on boosting democratic governance, human rights, and economic opportunity as opposed to controlling economic alliances. Since when? They even tried to control the systems. Oh, no, no, no. This is back when Bitcoin was just the only big dog. Oh, no, no, you can't use Bitcoin. You shouldn't use Bitcoin. Then they went to crypto. Once XRP, Hedera, and Algorand were getting deep in Africa, just as an example, because they did the same thing in Latin America. What did they do? IMF showed up, popped up. Hey, how you doing? No, you shouldn't use crypto. Crypto's bad. We don't think you should do that. Putting pressure on them. Hey, you need some sort of money. You want to borrow some money? And using those control mechanisms where they offer you money and now you feel like you're indebted to them and you have to do what they say. This is what they were doing all the way up until maybe towards the end of last year. So what they're saying now, let me finish this little tidbit here. It says, the list of members that reportedly want to join BRICS includes Saudi Arabia. That's going to be devastating. Devastating to the West. Petrodollar, looking at you here. Devastating. Iran, Egypt, Bahrain, Algeria, Argentina, and Indonesia, as well as 3 additional undisclosed nations, nations in Africa. So what they're pretty much saying here, it's not that they don't want to do anything. They can't do anything now. The risk is so high. So if they're not going to do anything, let's go back to the money, because that's what's really important. If they're not going to do anything, they can't stop the BRICS nations from coming out with a common currency where the BRICS nations represent more than half of the world's GDP, something like that. They have a huge swath of the population of the world also, and they're only growing, and they're growing exponentially, and they're not so hampered by regulations and such like that could stifle their growth. So they're going to continue to grow at a rapid rate. Then on top of that, you look at how they're trying to back their common currency with commodities, right? Not with a commodity, but then they have other digital assets on a local scale that they're going to be backing with commodities as well. Like you have one trying with grain, then you have one trying with oil, and of course you got a lot of them trying with gold. That's a lot of value. Now wait, that's going to have a devastating effect on the dollar if no one or barely anyone is using the dollar. But you have the U.S. State Department here pretty much saying, oh, well, we can't do anything about it. Why? Why? But then also that brings in the certainty that they're going to need something down the middle so that they can still interact with each other. New financial system coming in hot. That's a lot of capital. So, especially when it comes to tokenization, that is a lot of capital. Listen, I don't think there's any way around it. I mean, over time, I'm not saying immediately. I'm saying over time, there's the possibility, I believe, they could be moving trillions scaled into quadrillions. If we're talking interbank payments, if that's going to be a thing, interbank payments, B2B, on a lesser scale, B2P, P2P, tokenization. I mean, there's so much value that could possibly be moving across the blockchains, the DLTs, because Hashgraph is superior to blockchain, but the DLTs, let's just say the DLTs, it's mind blowing at this point. And they can't stop this because it's something that China wants to do, and obviously other powerful entities want to do. And there's such a very tense dynamic there. If you look once again, if you look at what's going on in Taiwan, they can't really step on each other's toes too much. They can't. Don't get me wrong. They throw little jabs here at each other. The world powers, they throw little jabs at each other, but they don't really, right now, it doesn't seem like they really want anything that's out of their control to set things off. They have things that are under their control right now. They have all these Navy ships and stuff like that, strategically, positioning themselves around each other. But they feel that's what they can control. They don't want something out of their control, setting things off. So they're not trying to step on each other's toes when it comes to the different financial systems that they're setting up. So I'm keeping all of that in mind, because it makes the new financial system that much more necessary. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? I know what I'm going to do with it. Look, I think that first is going to be very hard times. And then I think out of that, like the people say, the phoenix rises out of that. I think out of that will come the implementation to save everything with the new financial system. But first, we're seeing a multitude of collapses already. I think it has to play itself out. It's going to take a little bit of time. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? I know what I'm going to do with it. So until next time, let's get to the money.